She didn't mean to save his daughter. She just couldn't stand there and watch a child get hurt. That's the part nobody seems to understand about Wren Calloway. She wasn't brave in the way people mean when they use the word, the calculated kind, the kind that comes with a plan and an exit strategy. She was brave the way a person is brave when their body moves before their brain catches up. The way you lunge for a glass before it falls off the table. Reflex. Instinct. The thing underneath thought. And that instinct, on a Tuesday evening in late October, in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel in Vancouver, changed the rest of her life. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Wren Calloway had been working banquet service at the Meridian for 3 years by the time that night happened. 22 years old, student loans she didn't like to think about, a shared apartment in East Van with 2 roommates and a cat that technically belonged to neither of them. She'd taken the job at the hotel when her second year of university fell apart. A personal situation, she'd tell people, which was the polite way of saying her mother got sick and somebody had to pay for things. She wasn't bitter about it. That was the thing about Wren. She didn't have much bitterness in her. She had other things instead. Patience, stubbornness, the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying responsibilities that belonged to someone twice your age and choosing to keep going anyway. The Meridian was old money, the kind of hotel where the marble in the lobby had been imported, where the flower arrangements cost more than Wren made in a week, where the guests arrived with security details and didn't make eye contact with staff. She'd learned the rhythms of it. She knew which guests tipped and which didn't. She knew which events ran long and which ended early. She knew the difference between a guest who was wealthy and a guest who was powerful, and she'd learned, without anyone telling her directly, that the powerful ones had a different energy entirely, quieter usually, stiller, like the calm in the middle of something dangerous. That Tuesday night, the Meridian was hosting a private dinner on the mezzanine level. Invitation only, no public announcements, no event listing on the hotel calendar, which was the first sign, if you knew what signs to look for. The security presence in the lobby was doubled. 2 men near the front entrance who weren't hotel staff. Another near the elevator bank. Their suits were good, but their eyes were better, constantly moving, scanning, cataloging. Wren had been assigned to the service corridor that ran behind the mezzanine. Her job was simple. Keep the trays moving, keep the glasses filled, stay invisible. She was good at invisible. At 7:30, she was carrying a tray of dessert cups back toward the kitchen when she heard it. Not a sound, exactly, more of a shift in the air. The particular silence that comes right before something goes wrong. Then the sound of a door opening too fast. Footsteps, not the soft, measured footsteps of hotel guests. Something else entirely. She rounded the corner into the side corridor, just as a man she didn't recognize grabbed a little girl by the arm. The child couldn't have been older than 6. She was wearing a white dress with a dark ribbon at the waist, the kind of dress that meant somebody loved her enough to put care into how she looked for an evening. She had dark curly hair and enormous eyes, and she was not making any sound at all, which was somehow more alarming than if she'd been screaming. Children who don't cry when something frightens them have usually learned, very early, that crying doesn't always help. The man who had her arm was looking back over his shoulder. He hadn't seen Wren yet. Later, she would not be able to tell you exactly what she thought in that moment. Because the truth is, she didn't think. She set down the tray. She would remember setting down the tray, carefully, on the ledge beside her, which said something about Wren, that even in that half-second she was careful. And then she stepped forward. "Hey," she said. The man turned. She stepped between him and the child. What happened in the next 40 seconds happened fast enough that Wren's memory of it came back in pieces. Later, in the hospital, the lurch of the man reaching for something at his waist, the sound of her own voice saying, "Run, go, run," to the child, the feeling of something burning across her left side that she didn't immediately understand was a knife. The weight of her own shoulder hitting the corridor wall as she pushed the man's arm up and sideways, the crack of something against the floor, voices from the stairwell at the end of the hall, running footsteps, and then the man was gone, just gone, and the corridor was quiet, and Wren was sliding down the wall, one hand pressed to her side, and the little girl was standing 6 feet away looking at her with those enormous eyes. "Are you okay?" the child asked. Ren laughed. She couldn't help it. Her ribs hurt when she laughed, and she laughed anyway. "I'm okay," she said. "Are you okay?" The child nodded. She came closer, carefully, the way children are careful when they sense something is serious, and crouched down in front of Ren the way small people do, knees together, tilting her head. "Your side is bleeding," she said. "I know," Ren said. "It's okay. Someone's gonna come soon." Someone did come. Several someones, actually, within about 30 seconds. But the first one through the door at the end of the corridor was not hotel security, and was not the police, and was not anyone Ren might have expected. He was tall, dark coat, no tie, shirt collar open at the throat. Mid-40s maybe, though he had the kind of face that could hold age without surrendering to it. He crossed the corridor in 4 strides, and was already on one knee beside the child before he'd fully stopped moving, his hands on her shoulders, his voice low and tight, with something that lived underneath the control he was clearly accustomed to maintaining. "Lily, Lily, look at me. Are you hurt?" "No," the little girl, Lily said. "She is, though." She pointed at Ren. The man looked up, and this is the part Ren has never been able to describe properly, even to people she trusts. She's tried. She's said intense. And she's said like being assessed by something that doesn't miss anything. And she's said like, "He looked at me and made a decision I didn't know was being made." None of it is quite right. The closest she's gotten is this. He looked at her the way people look at things they're going to take care of. Not kindly, not unkindly. Just with certainty. "Hold on," he said. He didn't explain what she was supposed to be holding on to. He turned to the 2 men who'd come in behind him and gave instructions in a voice too quiet for Ren to fully hear. And within 2 minutes, she counted. The way you count things when you're trying to stay conscious. There was a medic crouching beside her with gloved hands and a kit, and the corridor was full of people moving with the organized urgency of people who were used to crises, and Lily Hartwell was tucked against the man's side with his arm around her shoulders, and he was looking at Ren again. "I need your name," he said. "Ren," she said. "Ren Calloway." Something crossed his face that she didn't have a name for yet. "Ren," he said, like he was registering it, filing it somewhere. Okay, he didn't tell her his name then. She would find out later. From a nurse who didn't know she wasn't supposed to say, from the way the staff at the hospital behaved differently around the men who waited in the corridor outside her room, from the quiet accumulation of detail, that the man's name was Nico Hartwell, and that Lily was his daughter, and that the name Hartwell, in certain circles in Vancouver and beyond, meant something specific and serious and not entirely legal. She didn't know any of that yet. All she knew, lying on the floor of the service corridor of the Meridian Hotel, with a medic pressing something against her side, and the ceiling lights very white above her, was that the little girl in the white dress was safe. That was enough for right now. She woke up in a private room. Not a hospital ward, a private room, the kind with a window that looked out over the city, and a chair that didn't look like it had come from a waiting area, and a blanket that was definitely not standard issue. It smelled of clean linens and something faintly like cedar. Her side was bandaged. Her hand, when she moved it, pulled at the tape of an IV line. Someone had taken off her work shoes and put them neatly at the foot of the bed. There was a woman sitting in the chair by the window. 60s, elegant, the white-streaked hair pinned up in a way that had probably taken practice. She was reading something on a tablet, and she looked up when Ren stirred. "Good," she said. "You're awake. Where am I?" Ren asked. Her voice came out rougher than she expected. "St. Paul's, private wing." The woman set the tablet down on her knee. "You've been sedated for a few hours." The cut was deep, but it missed anything important. "You were lucky. Is the girl?" "Lily is fine." The woman said it with a particular softness that told Ren exactly what Lily meant to her. "She's with her father." Ren processed this. "Who are you?" The woman looked at her for a moment, a considering look, not unkind, and then she smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached wherever smiles are supposed to reach. "My name is Sylvia Hartwell," she said. "Lily is my granddaughter." The name Hartwell was beginning to acquire weight, even through the medication. "Nico Hartwell's mother?" Ren asked. Sylvia raised an eyebrow. "You've been doing some thinking for someone who's been unconscious. I've been awake for about 90 seconds. Fair. Sylvia set the tablet aside entirely and leaned forward slightly. My son will be here soon. He wanted to be here when you woke up. She paused, choosing words with the precision of someone who has learned to choose words carefully, not a man who takes debts lightly. Ren looked at her. I didn't do it to be owed anything. I know, Sylvia said. That's exactly why it matters to him. Nico Hartwell arrived 17 minutes later. He came through the door the way he'd crossed that corridor, purposeful, contained, as though movement was something he'd decided to do rather than something that simply happened. He was carrying a coffee that was clearly from somewhere better than the hospital cafeteria, and he stopped when he saw that Ren was awake, and the controls slipped, just slightly, just for a second. The doctor said she'd be up, he said to his mother. She is, clearly, Sylvia said, standing. I'll give you two a moment. She squeezed Ren's hand once, briefly, on her way to the door, a gesture that managed to be both formal and warm at once, the way a certain kind of woman can do those two things simultaneously. Nico sat in the chair his mother had vacated. He set the coffee on the windowsill. He looked at Ren with those eyes that didn't miss things. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I got stabbed, she said. A corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. An acknowledgement, maybe. My daughter told me what happened, he said, in detail. She's thorough, when she wants to be. Something moved through his expression when he said it. Love, obviously, but something else too, the particular terror of a parent who has spent a moment believing they almost lost something irreplaceable. She said you told her to run, that you put yourself between her and him. It happened quickly, Ren said. I didn't have time to calculate anything. No, he said. I know, He stopped, started again. Most people in that situation would have found a reason to be somewhere else. I'm not most people. He looked at her again with that look she didn't have a name for yet. No, he said quietly. You're not. There was a silence. Outside the window, Vancouver was doing what Vancouver did in October, gray and wet and still somehow beautiful, the mountains invisible behind cloud cover, the city lights beginning to gather in the early dark. I want to talk to you about your situation, he said. Ren shifted against the pillow. My situation. The man who attacked Lily was not acting alone. He knew she would be at the Meridian tonight. He knew which corridor she was using. That's not a random threat. His voice was even, factual, the voice of someone who has learned that managing information is a form of control. The people who sent him are going to know that the attempt failed. They're going to know someone intervened, and they are going to try to find out who. Ren let this land. You're telling me I'm in danger, she said. I'm telling you that the danger is real, and that I'm going to make sure it doesn't touch you. He said it without emphasis, without drama, the way you'd say I'm going to pick up groceries on the way home. A thing that was already decided. But to do that, I need to know where you're staying, and I need to have people with you until this is resolved. Ren thought about her apartment in East Van, her two roommates, the cat that technically belonged to neither of them. That's not a small thing you're asking, she said. I know, you don't know me. I know what you did, he said, and I know why you did it. That's more than I know about most people I deal with. He held her gaze. I'm not asking you to trust my reputation. I'm asking you to trust what's in front of you. She studied him. It was a strange thing, to be studied by someone who studied you back, without flinching on either side. Most people looked away when you looked at them too long. Nico Hartwell did not look away. Okay, she said finally, but I have conditions. His expression shifted again. Surprise, maybe, or something adjacent to it. She got the impression he wasn't frequently presented with conditions. My roommates can't be involved, she said. Whatever arrangements you make, they stay out of it. And my mother, she's in a care facility in Burnaby. I need to know she's safe too. He nodded once. Done. And I keep working, she said. I need my paycheck. I'm not going to stop my life because of something that got dropped on it. He looked at her for a moment. Then, for the first time, something in his face unlocked, just slightly, a real thing moving behind the control. Okay, he said. The next 3 weeks happened the way significant things sometimes happen, incrementally and then all at once. There were 2 men from Nico's detail who drove her to work and waited and drove her home. She named them in her head. The quiet one was Tall Paul, The one who talked too much was Marco, and after the first few days they stopped pretending they were invisible and started having actual conversations with her on the drives. Marco's wife was expecting. Tall Paul had a border collie. These were the small facts that made unusual things feel manageable. She visited her mother at Briarwood Care in Burnaby on the Thursday of the first week, the way she always did, and there were 2 new faces at the front desk who looked like they belonged somewhere else. And her mother asked if she'd eaten, and Wren said yes, and her mother told her she looked tired, and Wren said she was fine, and it was an ordinary conversation that felt completely extraordinary because Wren knew, now, what kind of world was adjacent to hers and hadn't known before. Lily Hartwell found her on a Saturday. Wren was sitting in the hotel lobby on her break. She'd gone back to work by the end of the first week, with 2 shadows who blended in with surprising professionalism. And there was a small presence at her elbow, and she looked down, and there was Lily in jeans and a sweater looking very serious. "Hi," Lily said. "Hi," Wren said. "My dad said I wasn't supposed to bother you. What do you think?" Lily considered this. "I think I wanted to say thank you properly. In person. Not through him." Wren moved so there was room on the bench. Lily sat down. "You said thank you in the hospital," Wren said. "That doesn't count. You were on medicine." Lily folded her 7 next month. "Happy almost birthday. Thank you." A pause. "I wasn't scared, you know. At first, no, I was before you came. And then you were there, and I wasn't anymore." She looked at Wren with the direct, uncomplicated gaze of a child who hasn't yet learned to be indirect about things. "Why did you help me?" Wren thought about this honestly, the way she thought Lily deserved. "Because you needed it," she said. "And I was there." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this. "My dad talks about you," she offered. "Does he not a lot? He doesn't talk about things a lot. But when he does, it's about things that matter to him." Wren looked at this small, serious person beside her and felt something complicated move through her chest. Warmth, and something more cautious than warmth. And underneath both of those things, something that she was not going to look at directly yet. "You should tell your dad you said hi," she said. "He knows," Lily said simply. "He always knows where I am." It was Sylvia who said it first. 3 weeks in, Wren was having tea with her in the private dining room of the house in West Vancouver, where Nico apparently lived. She'd been brought there for what Sylvia called a proper conversation away from all the logistics, and which turned out to mean exactly what Sylvia had said. Just tea. Just talking. Sylvia poured. The cups were the good kind. "He's not easy to know," Sylvia said without preamble. "My son, he wasn't always this way, sealed up like that. But the work he chose, and what it cost him, his marriage, certain years, certain versions of himself, it changes the way a person manages their interior life." "Why are you telling me this?" Wren asked. "Because he's going to have difficulty telling you himself." Sylvia set down the pot. "He's going to come at it sideways. Probably say something about security arrangements being ongoing, or about Lily needing consistency, or about practical considerations. He's very good at practical considerations." She looked at Wren over the rim of her cup. "I want you to understand the translation." Wren was quiet for a moment. "You're assuming a lot." "I'm old," Sylvia said pleasantly. "I'm allowed." She wasn't wrong about the way Nico came at it. He found Wren that same evening after Lily had been put to bed and the house had settled into its evening quiet. He was in the kitchen, actually in the kitchen, jacket off, making something at the stove that turned out to be pasta, which was not what she'd expected, and he looked up when she came in. "Tea with my mother," he said. It was not quite a question. "She's good company." "She's terrifying," he said. "Don't let the cups fool you." Wren sat down at the kitchen island. She watched him move around the kitchen with the same controlled efficiency he brought to everything, and she thought about what Sylvia had said, and she thought about the translation. "The threat's been resolved," he said, not looking up from the pot. "The people responsible for what happened at the Meridian, that's been handled. As of yesterday." "I see," she said. "Which means," he said, carefully, "the security arrangement we discussed is no longer strictly necessary." She waited. He put the spoon down. He turned to look at her. "Strictly," she said. "Right." There was a silence that was doing a lot of work. "I want to be direct with you," he said, "because I think you're someone who prefers that." "I am," she said. Lily asks about you every day, he said. She doesn't ask about most people. She's careful, like I am about who she lets in, but she's decided about you. He held her gaze. And I am not in the habit of second-guessing my daughter's instincts. That's about Lily, Ren said. No, he said. It's not. The kitchen was quiet. The city outside was doing its gray October thing. I've spent a considerable amount of time, Nico Hartwell said, with the careful precision of someone choosing every word on purpose, trying to think of what I can offer you that's in any way proportionate to what you did. And I can't. There is nothing proportionate to someone stepping in front of danger to protect your child when they had every reason to walk the other way. I told you, Ren said. I wasn't calculating. I know. He came around the island and sat down 2 seats away, close enough that she could see what his face looked like when the control was all the way down. It looked, she thought, like a man who was very tired of guarding things. But I've been calculating since. And what I keep coming back to is that I don't want you to leave. Ren looked at him. That's also not a small thing to say, she said. No, he agreed. I'm 22, she said. I have student loans. I work banquet service, and I live in East Van with 2 roommates and a cat. I know. She gestured slightly at the kitchen, at the house, at everything that the house implied. I know that too. She sat with it for a moment. The pasta was going to overcook. She thought he probably knew that and didn't care. My mother's care, she said finally. I need to keep making her payments myself. I'm not going to have that handed to me. That's mine. Something in his face shifted. Recognizing her, she thought, the particular way she was made. Okay, he said, and I'm going back to school eventually. When things are settled, I know. And if Lily ever asks me to read to her, I'm going to say yes, and that's not negotiable. His expression did something it hadn't done before. Something open, something warm, something that changed the lines of his face entirely. That, he said, is absolutely not a problem. She looked at him. He looked at her. Outside, the rain had started, the particular soft Vancouver rain that doesn't announce itself, just arrives, just settles in for the evening. Okay, she said. And that was how Ren Calloway, 22 years old, East Van, student loans, the cat that belonged to neither of her roommates, became the person that Nico Hartwell had decided was going to be in his life. Not in a single dramatic declaration in front of witnesses, not in a moment anyone would put in the papers, in a kitchen, over pasta that had definitely overcooked by now, in a house on the west side of Vancouver on a Tuesday evening in late October. She had not meant to save his daughter. She'd just stepped in because a child needed it and she was there. But here is the thing about Ren Calloway that most people, in the time since, have come to understand. She was always going to step in. It was never really about calculation. It was never about what she'd get. It was just who she was. The person who set down the tray carefully and stepped forward anyway. And Nico Hartwell, who spent most of his life around people who moved through the world with an eye on what they could take, had simply finally recognized what it looked like when someone didn't. If you've made it to the end of this one, thank you. Genuinely. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think Nico should have said that night in the kitchen. And if you think Ren made the right call, not just in the corridor, but in that kitchen, tell me that too. Don't forget to hit like if this story found you at the right moment, and subscribe to Lily's Romance Library so you don't miss what's coming next. Because trust me, there's more where this came from.